We all grew up with some sort of dish that involves peas and carrots. It doesn't matter what your cultural background is. I bet there's some sort of pie or stew or curry or something like that that involves the peas and carrots. In the Levant, there's two versions. There's a stewed version and then there's like a rice version. Today I'm going to share the stewed version that we do eat with rice. We call it Bazaella, which means rice with peas. And I guarantee every kid from the Levant grew up eating some version of this. It won't be exactly like how I'm doing it, but this is how I grew up with it, and I think it's the best. But regardless, it's extremely comforting, it's homey, it's cozy, it's the perfect home-cooked meal. And it's a basic staple I think every culture has, especially us. So I'm gonna step through exactly how I make it, and I hope you can give it a try. Alright, to get this started, I always like to do my prep work first and then move on to the cooking. That way I don't have to move back and forth between the cutting board and the stove, so bear with me while I get through this. It should be really quick. Like any great stew, the first piece of the puzzle is an onion. I'm using a yellow onion and I'll be dicing it. The easiest way to do that in my experience is to first slice off the tail of the onion, or what I call the tail. It's the side opposite of the root. Once you do that, you have a nice flat surface to sit the onion upright, and then slice it down the middle, and then from here I'll remove the outer layers of the onion, so I'm only working with the nice parts of it. The outer layers are usually, thick or fibrous, and they don't cook down well and they become chewy, so it's best to just get rid of it. Also, when you're dicing an onion, I find it easiest to leave the root intact because it actually holds all the layers together, so that you can slice and dice it without the onion layers slipping and sliding around everywhere. It just makes your life a lot easier, so keep the root intact, please. Once the outer layers are peeled off, lay the flat side face down and then slice thin slits across the onion. And notice I'm not slicing it all the way to the top. This is on purpose, so that the root is intact and it still holds all the layers together. If you slice it all the way through to the top, you're just going to separate the piece from the onion, and then it kind of defeats the purpose of leaving the root intact. So don't slice it all the way to the top. Once you slice your slits all the way across the face of the onion, rotate it 90 degrees, and then slice this all the way through, and then you get these nice small cubes or small pieces of what we can call a diced onion. So from there, scoop them up, place them in the bowl, or set them aside somewhere for later use. Next, we have a couple large carrots. I like to slice the tips and roots off first, and then using a sharp peeler, go ahead and remove the outer layer of the carrot. The outer layer is usually a bit ugly, no offense, and it might have some hard to reach dirt or whatnot, so it's best to just remove that outer layer. And once you've peeled the carrot, slice thin circles out of them, as easy as it can be. It's actually very easy to do this. No crazy, slicing and dicing or julienne cutting of the carrot, just big circles. The thickness is totally up to you. I typically try to get anywhere from like 1/8 to 1/4 inch thick slices. I just think the look of it is better at this thickness, and it also cooks a lot faster, so it's a double win. And the same thing with the carrots. Scoop them up, place them in a bowl or somewhere convenient for later use. And now my favorite part, the garlic. As you can see, this recipe calls for 3 cloves of garlic, so naturally I put 10 pieces because the more the better. And also I'm gonna be dividing this garlic up, so I put a lot extra, that way I can divide this in half. And I'm going to use half of this for something very special at the end of this recipe that is special in my house. That's also why I put so much. But you could use anywhere from 3 to 5 cloves if you don't want to do the end part. And also, I don't want to grind garlic twice, which is why I'm just going to grind all of this all at once. It's just better to get it all done in one go. So to grind garlic, I like to add a bit of salt as an abrasive and then go crazy until you get a nice garlic paste. Also in the Levant, we typically use a wooden mortar and pestle, but since I'm a Southern California boy, I have a love for the molcajete. It's the same thing, but you can just do so much more with these, so I kind of prefer it. And if you don't have either of these, you can use one of those garlic presses, which I know it gets a lot of hate, but who cares? It's not that deep. And if you don't have one of those, you can do the old-fashioned method and just use a knife. And that's it for the prep. If you're wondering about the peas, I usually just get a bag of frozen peas, and that's exactly what I'm going to do today. So now we can move on to the next step, which is the cooking. Get yourself a pan or a pot on high heat for a few minutes and let it heat up. I'm using a 4-quart saute pan, so get anything that's at least this size or larger for this recipe. Once the pan has heated up, add a couple tablespoons of olive oil. I'm using my very favorite Le Cuisine Lebanese olive oil. I have a link in the description below with a discount code if you're interested. And let that heat up for a minute and then drop in the diced onion. Let the onions saute for a few minutes. I like to move them around every so often. And also make sure you're cooking this on a medium to medium low heat. You don't want it to get too hot, otherwise the olive oil and the onions will start to burn, and that's not what we're going for. After a few minutes of sauteing, the onions will start to look a bit translucent and they'll also look really soft. So at this point, you can add half of the garlic and put that in the pot. Mix it around for another minute or two. Really what I'm looking for here with the garlic is fragrance. I know I'm ready to move on to the next step when the garlic is really fragrant and borderline changing color or browning, which happens really quick, so please don't walk away. You might burn your garlic. And when garlic burns, it leaves like a really bitter taste. I'm not a fan of it, so try not to let it burn. And then from here, we're going to add our meat. I'm using 1.5 pounds of 10% fat ground beef. That's my go-to ratio for ground beef. I just like cooking with that ratio, but use whatever is convenient for you. But I will say if you use a higher fat percentage, there's going to be a lot more water or fat released into the stew. So what you can do is either dump some of that out as you're cooking, or you'll have to let this pot sit and simmer for a bit longer to let that evaporate. Either way, it works. Don't be afraid of using a higher fat percentage if that's what you prefer. This is just my opinion that when there's too much fat, then the stew becomes a little too thick. But once the meat is added in, I like to break it up into big pieces and then let it sit for a while to cook. And then after a minute or two, I'll break it up a little bit more into small chunks and then let it sit and cook. And then I'm going to repeat that over and over until the meat is cooked through all the way and there's no more pink left in it. And another preference of mine is that I like to break up the meat as small as possible. I just prefer the look of it that way in this stew, but if you prefer like larger pieces, then by all means do that. That works perfectly fine as well. Cook the meat until a majority of the fat is rendered out. You can see here when I push the meat aside like this, all the water and fat from it comes pouring in. And I don't want all of that there, but I do want some because that's flavor. So just let it simmer and it will slowly evaporate away. I'm just looking for a thin or shallow layer of fat to cover the bottom before moving on. So here I can see that there's a bit more than I like or what I would use, but that's okay because I'm going to be cooking more and it's going to continue to cook and evaporate away as we move forward. Now from here we add our frozen peas. This is your standard bag of frozen peas. Drop that right into the pot and then the carrots. Let those cook for about 5 minutes and mix them around every so often. What I'm looking for here is that the peas are thawed and soft before moving forward. What I've found is if I try to move too quickly and the peas haven't thawed all the way through, when I'm done cooking my stew, the peas still have like kind of crunch to it, which I'm not going for. I want them to be soft peas. And already this is coming together so nicely. I wish I could share, but it smells so good in here, and I haven't added a single spice or even salt yet, which takes us to our next step. So from here, we add 1 small can of tomato paste, as much salt as you like. I know everyone's preference is a little bit different. And then I added about 1.5 teaspoons of salt for myself. And then a little bit of black pepper, as much as you like. And then last, we season with 2 to 3 tablespoons of Arabic 7 spice. I always eyeball it and I pour it freehand like this, but it usually comes out to about 2 to 3 tablespoons. This Arabic 7 spice is my personal blend. It's the mix I grew up with, so if you're interested, I also have this blend and others linked in my bio. It's Zawi Spices, and I have a discount code there as well if you're interested. But you can also find similar blends at your local Middle Eastern markets. It'll be listed as either Arabic 7 spice or Baharat, which literally just means spices in Arabic. This blend is the most commonly used in the region, so we just call it spices and everyone just knows what we're talking about. Once you've got those all added to your pot, mix for a few minutes or until the spices and tomato paste are evenly distributed throughout. High stress on evenly distributed. You don't want a huge concentration of spices in one spot or tomatoes paste in one spot. You want it as evenly distributed as possible. And now for my very favorite part of this all, we add the water. For this recipe, I added 2.5 cups of water. I mix it around so that everything's evenly distributed again, and then bring it up to a simmer. And this is why it's my favorite part. I'm just going to take a second and admire how nice this looks. All the colors, the red, the green, the orange, it just all comes together so nicely. I'm obsessed, so I'm going to admire it for a second. Once it's up to a simmer, cover the pot, drop to low, and let it cook for about 20 to 30 minutes. And then remove the lid, mix it around, and you're left with this beautiful stew. Now, at this point, you could be done, but there's a little extra bit that we do in my family that we call Adha. So what we're going to do for this is heat up a small pan on high heat for a little, then drop to medium heat, add a couple tablespoons of olive oil, and then a heavy pinch of red pepper flakes. Once that starts to give you a little sizzle, add the other half of garlic that we saved from the beginning, and we're going to flash fry that in the oil till it's super fragrant and really just right about to brown. And I can't tell you how happy this part makes me. The smell of flash fried garlic like this is totally unmatched, honestly. But be careful not to burn the garlic, otherwise you'll have that bitter taste, and that's not what we're going for. So once you have that fragrant smell and it's barely starting to brown, drop it right into your stew and mix. This is like the ultimate flavor bomb that just adds another dimension to the stew. A majority of our stews have an adha, and they're all slightly different from each other, so stay tuned. There's a lot of flavor bombs coming your way, and it's just gonna level up your stews. It's my favorite thing ever. And now your Bazaella is done, and it's ready to eat. This is always served with rice, and more specifically vermicelli rice that we call ruz b'sha'riyya. So if you'd like to learn how to make that, I'll include a link above or maybe at the end of the video. and in the description as well. So check that out if you want to learn how to make ruz b'sha'riyah. And the very last thing, I like to garnish a majority of my dishes with Aleppo pepper and parsley. So that's what I've added on top here. And that's about it. You have yourself a beautiful and comforting plate of Bazaella, the Levantine peas and carrots stew. All right, I have this guy plated right here below me. Let's give it a taste. I've made this 1,000 times and I'm already excited to take my first bite. Here we go. Everything I could hope and dream for. That's so good. This makes me want to put on a movie and check out for the night. I'm set. This is so nice. Now I know not everybody makes it exactly like this. It's probably close. So if you have a version of this, I would love to hear how you do it, how your family does it. Please share. I'm sure everyone would love to know the different ways people make it. Again, this is a community we're building, so please share, and I'd love to read. I go through every comment, so please share, and I'd love to know. And if there's anything that you'd like to see me make, please let me know. We're just getting started with the series, so drop it in the comments, and yeah, until next time, peace.